Derek, thanks to the Chief Seattle Club so very much. Are we going to get to see Randy's face close up now, Derek? So we can all lift our hands to him? Okay, well, thank you very, very much for opening our annual membership meeting with that song and drumming. We are gathered in really exceptional times, and as we open our membership meeting, I want to acknowledge that this is the 40th year that the coalition has done our work, that we are meeting this morning in the context of multiple exceptional circumstances, and that while we are going to try to introduce some celebration and joy into the conversation and recognition of the good that is being done, we also want to recognize the harm that is being done, including hundreds and thousands of years of harm to Indigenous peoples on this land, and also the large removal of people experiencing homelessness that is happening right now as we are gathered under the auspices of the City of Seattle, despite our demands, despite the CDC interim guidelines, despite the position of our local public health department. And we will be talking about those issues a little bit later on in our meeting. I want to thank all of you who are able to join us this morning and introduce the coalition staff who are, as always, helping to staff our membership meeting and who are with us on this call. To my upper right-hand corner, Jason Austin, the coalition's membership organizer. Then Hillary Coleman, our community projects manager, and Sasha Kuberling, our administrative coordinator. We also have our longtime, wonderful, tireless volunteer, Barbara Anderson, joining us. Thank you, Barbara. And a number of coalition board members who are on the call, whom I'll introduce shortly. I also want to say that we have, I tried very hard to invite someone who helped to found the Coalition on Homelessness 40 years ago, Martha Diltz, who is retired and who is in her apartment in Ballard and sends her warm, warm greetings to everyone. She's not technologically set up in a way that would allow her to join us, but I did have the pleasure of talking to her over the weekend, and she shared a couple of very important points with me that I wanted to pass on to all of us. The first thing she said was that really, of course, we cannot celebrate the fact that this organization has done its work for 40 years, because that's not something to celebrate, but it is something to commemorate. And she also said that when she and other service providers started doing the collective work of the coalition 40 years ago, I wish I could give this to you in her voice, but she said with great urgency, Allison, we never thought when we started this that 40 years later, people would be doing this same work, because it's a solvable problem. And I think we all bring to our work that understanding that homelessness is a manufactured crisis that does not need to exist. And as you will see shortly, as our board members share the work of having crafted our coalition's new mission, vision, and values that are going to help us continue our work and go forward, we are trying to get more and more explicit about our strategy and our impatience with knowing that there are solutions, that the greatest solution to homelessness is housing, and that our solidarity in this work is part of what is essential for us to succeed. We are joined by the Coalition's Board of Directors President, Kate Faber. Maybe you can wave, Kate, so people can see you. Thank you. Also by Derek Bellegarde, who introduced Randy, who's the Coalition's Board Treasurer. Derek, can I ask you to wave to the people? Thank you. Also by Anna Strahan, a member of the Coalition's Board of Directors. Anna, can you wave, please? Thank you very much. And Katie Escudero, who is the Vice President of the Board of Directors. Thank you, Katie. I'm not sure, I don't currently see on my screen other members of the board, so excuse me if there are other board members, would you please introduce yourselves in the chat box. I'm going to one more thing that I'd like to recognize before turning things over to Kate, Derek, and Anna, is to say that as the Coalition staff and I were preparing for today's meeting, we thought it would be important to name our recognition, and surely something that you all feel as well, that the nature of our meetings has changed for the time being. We deeply value the fact that part of our work is to create space that's really owned by people who are doing the frontline work every day, every night, and welcoming people who have personal experience of homelessness and other forms of marginalization. And it's extremely hard to do that on a Zoom call. We're looking for ways to do that. And once again, thank you to Randy and Derek and for helping to open our meeting with strength, the strength that music brings and a long history brings. And at the end of our meeting today, we're going to be joined by two other local musicians, a duet named Dear Crow, because part of what we're trying to do to remind ourselves of our solidarity and the fact that we can work together even while we are physically apart is to bring more art, music, poetry into our gatherings. At the same time, we know that we can't really have the dialogue that we thrive on. So we welcome your comments and interactions in chat, and of course by phone and email at other times, and any suggestions that you have as we adapt to the current, we hope temporary but not short, way of doing our work together. We're going to experiment a little bit with this, and we invite you to experiment with us and give us your honest feedback, and know that we, in some respects, are doubling down on what it means to be a coalition under these circumstances. So while it may look and feel a little different, the underlying values, as you're about to hear, are stronger than ever. And we thank you for adapting and hanging in there with us. And we all look forward to the time when we are going to be able to meet in person at the right time. So with that, I'm turning things over with great pleasure and appreciation to the President of the Board of Directors, Kate Faber.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with all of you today. As Allison said, I volunteer as the President of the Coalition's Board of Directors, and I'm here to share some long-term planning that the board has been engaged with or in over the past year, including adopting a new mission, vision, and values for the coalition. This set of work really grounds the coalition in our values and who we are, and guides our work moving forward for the next number of years, and helps us prioritize how we spend our capacity and time. And we spent a full year developing a new mission and a vision and values because we wanted this to be deeply informed by our members and by our community. And before we share our new set of values and mission and vision, I want to share how we arrived at these new statements. So the first thing we did last spring, some of you who've been involved for a while may have remembered, we solicited input about the coalition's values last spring and got a lot of great feedback. We conducted in-depth interviews with our board of directors and staff. We issued a membership survey to get feedback on our mission, vision, and values, and received responses from over 150 coalition members, which was remarkable. And we received some really rich feedback, so thank you all. We conducted interviews with over 20 stakeholders in our community, including people with lived experience, coalition members, frontline service providers, executive directors, public officials, leaders of color in our community, and other key partners. And we made a presentation to our membership last fall to get feedback on draft mission, vision, and value statements, and have incorporated that feedback. So the board just recently adopted final statements, and I'm really pleased to be here to share them with you because I think they reinforce the strong advocacy the coalition is doing and all of you have been doing in partnership with us around our community's COVID response. And I think they provide a really strong and clear guidepost for us to aspire to and to help direct our work in the coming years as we support our community in recovering from COVID and moving forward to address homelessness in our community. So I want to start by inviting Derek to share our new values.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I realized I was on mute earlier when Allison was asking me to pass over Randy again, but Randy had to leave. We just got word that they're actually sweeping and barricaded off 12th Street again. So we're trying to get some staff over there to get some outreach going. It's unfortunate. So I'm going to have to probably get off here soon. So early apologies. So yeah, the values was a collective effort, obviously. I want to thank all the general membership, the Skitch staff, and the fellow board. It was a long process, a lot of great ideas, and it was really hard work. It's amazing to think about when you look at the finished product, actually how much work went into it. There's a lot of bouncing back and forth, wordsmithing, but we feel like we really nailed it, and we came up with some really great values. So the 3 values we came up with: equity, collective action, and justice. Equity, to center race in the fight for housing justice, as white supremacy and structural racism cause disparities in who experience homelessness. Collective action, to collaborate, unite, and to build power. Justice, to uphold the dignity and civil rights of people experience homelessness or housing insecurity. We're really happy with this finished product. Can't wait to get everybody's thoughts, and hopefully everybody's happy with it, because we really feel like they're very strong values and what we should stand up for as a coalition. Yeah, I guess I'll pass it back to you, Kate. I should probably get it going and check in on this 12th Street action that's going on, this injustice going on.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate it. All right, moving on to our vision statement. Anna.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for all of the work that Kate mentioned. It was extensive surveying and conversations, and just a lot of feedback came into all of the work that we're talking about today. With respect to vision, we acknowledge that not every organization has to have a vision, but we feel like the fact that the type of work that the coalition members are doing, it basically necessitates something that is anchoring us and something that is aspirational. And with that, we landed on a region that acts on a shared sense of responsibility to ensure that everyone has a home. And we got some feedback last spring during one of the membership meetings. Obviously we didn't start with that concise of a statement. We, in thinking about the vision, talked about wanting to capture the essence of ending homelessness, but with more of an action aspect to it. And we really feel like the momentum and organizing that the coalition does is captured in this, with having the statement about acting on a shared sense of responsibility, as opposed to a statement that is, you know, something like ending homelessness, which is fairly aspirational, but want to hopefully make sure that we're moving forward with this. And the other thing about this vision, I think, is worth mentioning, and part of the feedback that we got is that it is not tied to moral judgment, and that it also acknowledges historical injustices that have taken place and that are contributing to the work that we're doing, that we're trying to work towards undoing.
Thank you, Anna. And next is our mission statement. So a mission statement is a statement that helps describe how the coalition will act in the work that we do and how we focus and prioritize our capacity to live out our values and to work toward achieving our vision. And for reference, I'll start by reading our old mission. We work collaboratively to ensure safety and survival for people while they are homeless and to end the crisis of homelessness in our region. And we've adopted a new mission that reads as, we mobilize our community to challenge systemic causes of homelessness and advocate for housing justice. And we made some changes to this mission to focus again on the systemic causes of homelessness in our community and to focus on the advocacy that we do together as a coalition to achieve housing justice, and thought that this is a bit more reflective of the work we want to be doing now and in the future. And as I mentioned before, the work the coalition has done together the last couple of months to respond to COVID, this really, the values and the vision and the mission really resonate, at least, you know, with me, and seeing our staff and our members and our board working to carry out these new ambitious statements. So we'd love to hear your reactions to these new final statements in the chat. And I want to share just a little bit about the board's next steps to really implement this new work and new focus. So what we'll be doing this fall, once we get through, hopefully, the worst of COVID, is returning to our longer term planning work, to developing a set of overarching goals for the coalition to focus on, to live out our values, our vision, and our mission. And we've developed a set of goals for the coalition's work over the next 3 years, which include advocacy, focusing our regional advocacy efforts on intersectional campaigns that address the systemic causes of homelessness and advance housing justice, organizational sustainability, ensuring sustainable level of financial resources, organizational systems and infrastructure, and staff and board capacity necessary to execute our mission, equity, create a culture of equity within the coalition in which staff, board, and coalition members openly discuss disparities and act on a shared commitment to reduce them, membership, to grow and strengthen our coalition by providing the training, education, and networking support sought by our members, and communication, and forming the public dialogue to help our community understand the root causes of homelessness and to counter narrative that dehumanizes and stigmatizes people experiencing homelessness. So our work this fall, we've paused this just temporarily while COVID remains a large focus of our staff time. And we'll be working in partnership with our staff and the rest of the board of directors to flesh out a plan of how we're going to pivot and focus the work of the coalition to live up to the values that we've identified, our vision, our mission, and these overarching goals. So we'll report back to you at the end of the year with our progress. And I just want to extend my sincere appreciation of all of your work, your collaboration, your membership, and everything you're doing to support people who are experiencing homelessness in our community. Thank you for your input over the past year to help us arrive at this new focus in our work.
Thank you, Kate. And I also just want to echo all of the strong support and the work that the staff has done around this, and particularly at this time, having to pivot towards COVID. It's really just shows how nimble this organization is, and really proud and honored to serve as a board member and be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Kate and Anna and Derek. Also Jen, Katie, Ben, and Nick, who are other board members on the call, and to all of you, our members who really informed this process and in every single day of our work ground us in the values that we now have made explicit. So I think this is really inspiring and grounding for us as staff in our work, and we are very grateful to have such an engaged community of members, partners, and board members to help us articulate who we are, what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and to get on with doing it. It occurred to us that because this is our annual meeting and we are opening elections for a slate of board candidates, which we'll get to in a little bit on the agenda, we wanted to very quickly take a look back at the last 12 months. And Hillary Coleman and Sasha Kerberling have a very short and lovely set of slides that they're going to take us all through to remind us of some, not all, of the work that together we have been doing since last May, as we think very seriously about the work that is currently underway and what we're going to do going forward.
Great, thank you, Allison. Well, Sasha pulls up these highlights. Like Allison mentioned, you know, we were planning for this, and if we were in person together, we would be getting celebratory food and having all of us do some reflection. And so I'm glad that we're able to do this together now, and really want to thank everyone for your contributions to our work this year. These are just a couple highlights. There's been a lot of work that's happened in the past year. So Sasha and I are gonna just kind of share a couple highlights with you.
Sorry, trying to unmute and screen share. There we go. So exactly this year, I heard about my position at the annual membership meeting, but in June and July, Jason and I joined the coalition team, both having worked previously as frontline staff at organizations that are very involved with the coalition. So we were very excited to join this team and bring our strengths here and learn from our team members.
And it was also about this time last year that we were dreaming up a campaign to adjust human services contracts annually for inflation and to make this mandatory legislation. As you can see in this photo, we had a lot of really important support out there, and Councilmember Mosqueda's bill is the bill that we all jointly passed together to make sure that human services contracts had automatic adjustments for inflation to account for the increasing cost of doing business that all businesses face, including organizations who are providing direct services.
In July, we had our Project Cool Volunteer Days, Project Cool being our program that we are able to provide backpacks for students experiencing homelessness. And last summer, we were able to fill 1,431 backpacks for students who were utilizing services at our member organizations.
And I'll add a little note onto Project Cool. We, as many of you can imagine, Project Cool is going to look a bit different this year, and our work to support homeless students is going to look a bit different because we can't quite have 200 volunteers coming through a small space together, touching all the supplies. And we're working with our member organizations who provide services to students to figure out what that's going to look like, to get folks some of the supplies sooner and to continue our workshops, making it even to one-on-one workshops and the trainings around making sure that students and providers who work with students have the resources that they need. And then in October, we worked with some partners to dream up something called Home for Good. And I know that many of you took action with us on this. We had hundreds of emails going into the Seattle City Council. So we designed the Home for Good program to help answer this question. Can we close the gap between high and rapidly increasing rents and low and stagnant disability benefits with a shallow rent subsidy and light case management? This was really important work that we did, and we are looking forward to seeing some of the future of this as well.
As Hillary mentioned, that we have hosted a number of case manager trainings, including supporting homeless students, McKinney Vento 101, which I believe was in September, and then our public benefits 101 with Sarah and Katie from Solid Ground, which was in December. At these two trainings, we were able to provide 185 frontline staff with tools and skills, in addition to these monthly meetings that we're hosting. There's also the South King County Forum that we co-convene, in which we are able to connect with all of you for resource sharing and information gathering.
Great. And last fall, we did our voter registration work, which really we do throughout the year. And this was going to be the year that we are envisioning doing it even more consistently, and we're still working on that. But last fall, we had 40 new volunteers trained, who you can see in these photos, who helped go out and register 282 eligible voters throughout the year. We really want to make sure that everyone knows that you don't need a house to have a voice and to vote, and also want to make sure that people know about the changes to the law that happened over 10 years ago at this point, to make sure that anyone with a previous felony conviction is able to vote. And so our volunteers are doing hard work, and I know that we have some of you on this call. We have Patricia, and we also have Lorianne on here, and so I want to thank you. If I missed anyone else that's on here that did voter registration work, thank you for being part of this.
Of course, we had the legislative session, so now we're getting into 2020. In February, we hosted our Homelessness Advocacy 101 workshops in partnership with the lovely Nancy Amadei. And then we also had a bus, as the coalition usually does. We take a bus down to Olympia for Housing and Homelessness Advocacy Day. And this year we had 38 advocates riding the bus with us from a number of member organizations. And we were able to hand deliver advocacy postcards, with which many of you wrote, sent messages to your lawmakers. And so thank you for your efforts and advocacy around that.
And then after the legislative session, it seems like really it was when the legislative session was wrapping up that, of course, COVID, it was becoming apparent that this was really going to be impacting the work of all of our organizations for the coming time. And so we have been pivoting our work a bit, but all in line with our mission, vision, and values that were shared earlier. So just wanted to highlight two things that that we've been working on specifically, among many other things that we'll talk about today. One is our homeless service change tracker. Many of your organizations have contributed to this. We really designed this to help frontline workers know where to refer their clients, and to help us all have an understanding of what services are open, limited to current clients only, changed or closed due to social distancing. And really, a lot of this showed us that what we kind of already knew, but we were able to really see this in the system-wide, is that we are already dealing with the crisis of homelessness and underfunding and not enough resources for people. And now on top of that, we're dealing with a pandemic. And so this was sobering work. Many phone calls were made. I think over 160 programs are listed in the tracker at this point. It's on our website. But I just want to thank all of you on this call and everyone who contributed to this to make sure that we have the information. And then one of the other highlights of I guess this was a little over a month ago at this point, we have been, as the coalition typically does, talking to all levels of government to make sure that the needs of people experiencing homelessness are being met and addressed, and especially in the responses to COVID, this has really been a top priority of our organization. Allison especially has been on countless meetings with many people, and we are working tirelessly alongside many of you to advocate for folks' needs. One of the things we wanted to highlight was that on April 8th, coalition members formed a panel to explain the urgent needs for accessible hygiene and sanitation at the Seattle City Council Select Committee on Homelessness Strategies and Investments. A shout out to some of our members who really shared the honest truth with council members who don't necessarily know what the realities are. And it was a really powerful panel. And the committee will meet again, and we continue to be communicating with Seattle City Council members, as well as King County Council members in the state and our federal delegation about prioritizing the needs of people experiencing homelessness in our responses to COVID, and especially about making sure that across the county, in our other local cities as well, that people have access to basic things like being able to wash their hands and use a hygienic bathroom. And one of the things, I'm going to toss it over to Allison, because there was something that came out of this advocacy that is a good start, and Allison will talk about it, but we acknowledge that we need to continue this type of advocacy as well.
Thank you so much, Hillary and Sasha. It's important for us to take a little bit of time to realize, as Pete said in the chat, it was only about a year ago that the work to ensure that we were providing adequate contract amounts for doing the work of homeless service and housing providers every day and every night was filling the room at Seattle City Council, something that's a little hard to picture right now. So I really, really appreciate the staff taking the time to remind us of what collective power and solidarity have looked like over the last 12 months. The one thing that I want to point out is that while we have done a lot of advocacy and will continue to do it on ensuring that people have access to basic sanitation, clean water, and food, we are not in any way, shape, or form slowing our advocacy for what people truly need, which is homes and the individual housing options that are ever more evident as the necessary response to a public health emergency on top of the crisis of homelessness for some 6,000 plus people who are without homes or shelters. There has been some progress, and one of the things that we realize is that not many people necessarily are aware that the Seattle Public Library has reopened bathrooms only at 5 Seattle Public Library locations, and they're up here on the screen. These are bathrooms that are open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. They're the main Central Library branch, the Ballard branch, Beacon Hill, Capitol Hill, and University District. What I want to urge all of you to do is to get the word out about this, because what's become clear in terms of the numbers of people using the libraries over the weeks that they have reopened these 5 branches for their bathrooms is that in the intervening time, people gave up on the libraries as a resource. And so the usage has been rather low. And I think that we need to ensure that people know about these and other basic services that are available to them. I had a conversation yesterday with the head of the Seattle Public Library to see what options might exist for adding additional services, making sure that people can charge their phones, fill their water bottles, maybe get some additional sort of easily accessible resources that everyone is used to being able to get at the library. And with your help, I think we would like to try to demonstrate that our advocacy to reopen public buildings so that people can have access to sanitation is successful, and we can encourage other public buildings and buildings across King County to do the same for the duration while they're needed. So with that, I would like to say that we're going to move to our board election. And I think we have a lovely slide that shows the slate of candidates for renewal for service on our board, and their smiling faces clutching their advocacy postcards for our state legislative advocacy priorities are here. So Derek Bellegarde, people met earlier. Derek serves as the board treasurer currently. Katie Escudero is on this call, and some of you may know Katie in her day job at the King County Housing Authority. Katie serves as the board vice president. Benjamin Miksch is also known to many longtime coalition members and partners and works at United Healthcare. And Ben is a longtime member of the board and past board president. And Jen Romo is a lovely member of the coalition's board of directors and serves as our board secretary. So each of these individuals has agreed to serve for another 3-year term. The election process is online. We have been offering online voting, thank goodness, for the last couple of years. So it will completely be online. Opening today, Sasha will make the link available. The way in which our voting works is we have a 1-week period in which you can vote on the slate of candidates, and the voting members of the coalition are organizational members who have paid their 2020 dues. Now, we suspended our membership drive when COVID hit, knowing that our member organizations were scrambling to do everything they could with not enough resources. And yet we are very, very grateful to our member organizations that have managed to pay their membership dues. And if you're not sure who the right person is at your organization, or not sure whether your organization has paid your 2020 dues, we invite you to just email membership@homelessinfo.org. And Sasha, Jason, Hillary, and I would, of course, also be happy to answer any questions. We understand that, well, we always say that financial circumstances should not be a barrier to membership. That applies to individuals as well as organizations. So we hope that over the course of the next week, all of our eligible voting member organizations will cast their votes for this wonderful board slate. And then in the fall, we will probably resume the planned recruitment for new members to join the board of directors, which was in process in the spring, and which is something that the board decided to put on hold as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the next thing that I would like to do, I'd like to make sure Sasha and Hillary, I wonder if you could check, because I'm not sure whether or not I see Councilmember Morales on our call yet. Not yet. Okay. So, please bear with me while I just check my email to see that I haven't missed anything. Okay. I think perhaps what we might do
I think here Councilmember Morales is now.
Is she? Okay, wonderful. Yes. Great. That's terrific. This is a complicated orchestration, and made more complicated as we referenced earlier. Both Derek and I made note of the fact that right now the city of Seattle is carrying out what I now refer to as a COVID sweep. So While Councilmember Morales is joining us, I want to just briefly say that the coalition has, for the entire time that I have worked at the coalition, organized to protect the human rights, the civil rights, and the dignity of people who are without homes and without shelter, who in their thousands are living outside in our communities, because that has somehow been deemed an acceptable response by holders of power. We don't find it to be acceptable under any circumstances that people are left to fend for themselves. We have proudly and successfully wrangled with multiple mayoral administrations over these kinds of dehumanizing and morally wrong actions. And now, in the context of a global public health emergency, in the context of interim guidance from the Centers for Disease Control that clearly states, in the absence of individual housing options, people living unsheltered should not be moved during community transmission of COVID-19. We are seeing the city of Seattle go against what Mayor Durkin and members of her administration said at the beginning of this pandemic, which was that they would only take such action in a true emergency. We've now, this week alone, seen 2 major sweeps of people experiencing homelessness outside. We've seen at least 2 others, both the Ballard Commons sweep on May 4th and a sweep of a portion of the area outside the Navigation Center shelter on April 24th. The coalition has expressed our strong opposition and outrage, not only to the mayor and to the city council, but we have been in communication with people at the Centers for Disease Control, with our public health department, and with the Washington State Attorney General's office, as well as with attorneys on the ground here. And so I want to assure you, our members, that we will continue to advocate essentially on every front possible. I want to recognize and acknowledge the extraordinary work of the frontline outreach staff, DESC, REACH, the Urban League, Chief Seattle Club, and others. I believe Nikita Oliver is live streaming what she is correctly referring to as a human rights violation right now, and acknowledge that there are better ways to proceed. And some of our colleagues whom I just named, along with the Public Defender Association and their co-lead program, are putting forth rational, reasonable, and doable alternatives to further endangering people who are already at grave risk from being homeless, as well as at grave risk should they contract COVID-19. So in the context of all of that work, all of that organizing, those multi-dimensional ways in which we are trying to protect people and limit the harm that is being done by our city government, I want to recognize and thank members of our city council, particularly Councilmember Tammy Morales, who is joining us now, Councilmember Teresa Mosqueda, Councilmember Shama Sawant, who have all sponsored legislation that is before the council now. And I want to turn the Zoom floor over to Councilmember Morales to speak about the legislation that she and her colleagues have crafted. And if we have some time, take a few questions and comments from our members. And we will, of course, also invite everyone to reach out to council members and the mayor, both in support of this legislation and other necessary appropriate responses to this crisis. Councilmember Morales, thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Allison. Thanks for inviting me on the call, everybody. I do want to let you know that I have a call with folks in the CID at 10 o'clock, so I will have to be brief. I did go to the encampment removal yesterday. There were, I think, about 20, 30 police officers there, and it was really hard to watch. I had a conversation with a gentleman named Jacob who talked about his experience being removed dozens of times from different places, and really just sort of walked me through the trauma of having to pack up in half an hour, moving things, and just said, like, if you have to move outside this perimeter to drop your stuff off, they don't let you back in to get the rest of your things. They decide what gets stored and what doesn't, and they won't store clothing that's dirty, and then you have to watch your stuff get destroyed. The folks that we talked to said nobody had been offered shelter or housing, and that the rich people do come by and take their name, but there's no place to go because they don't want to go into a shelter. And so he said, he's been on the list for 2 years trying to get into a tiny house, and just, talked about the many different places that he's gone when things like this happen. So we know that this is a really traumatic experience, and we acknowledge that there is a lot of issues in the community who themselves are trying to deal with having, dealing with COVID, dealing with trying to navigate their neighborhood. So what we are trying to do with this legislation that we introduced, really the intent was two things. We are trying to codify the HSD policies or directives that the mayor herself discussed when the coronavirus broke out, and trying to make sure that we are protecting everybody's public health by limiting the ability to remove people if public health resources have not been offered. And so that's really, I think, the crux of what the conversation is right now is, if we are removing people, particularly in light of the coronavirus, let's make sure that we are moving them to a place where they have an individual unit available so that they are protected, the community is protected, and we're not just moving people from neighborhood to neighborhood in the midst of an infectious disease epidemic. So that's sort of the crux of what what the legislation does. I want to be clear that we are not advocating for inaction. We're not advocating for leaving people where they are. What we want is to begin the conversation that says, this is not a strategy. Just moving people around isn't a strategy. We need to continue the conversation and continue the action of moving people into tiny home villages, sanctioned encampments, hotels, if hotels are an option, and it sounds like that might be an option for, at least for some folks, as we move into new, very innovative kind of programming. But just moving people around isn't a strategy. And so, we fully expected that there would be pushback from the executive's office, and that's not a reason not to do this. So we are working with our colleagues to understand what issues they might have and want to have it included and addressed in this conversation, and look forward to the public committee meeting that is scheduled for next Wednesday at 2 o'clock.
Thank you so much, Councilmember. I know you just have a few minutes before you have an important phone call, and I want to acknowledge that that we have, like you, also been in dialogue with our members and partners who are in the Chinatown International District, in the area around both of the locations that were subject to sweeps yesterday and today. And I want to just see if we can get one or two questions for you. Someone has asked whether the legislation includes any penalties if the city of Seattle continues to carry out sweeps.
So one thing to be clear about is that this is a budget bill. So really what this bill is doing is saying that we cannot spend public money to engage in these activities. It doesn't affect the daily operations of our first responders. So it says that we can't spend money, these agencies can't spend money to do these things. So that is the that is the leverage, if you will,
Mhm.
that we have, that we're intending with this bill.
Right. Thank you. And I think that people may not necessarily realize that, of course, your work on this legislation is under the instruction from the governor that all government legislative bodies need to only consider legislation at this time that is related to COVID-19. But of course,
Yeah,
this is
that's a good point.
clearly
Allison,
related to COVID-19. Yeah. Councilmember, I want to thank you so much. Is there anything just in your last couple of minutes with us that you might like to share in terms of how I think, members of our coalition are, I would say, broadly in support of efforts to ensure that the city's actions put public health and people at the center now and always? Are there things other than, of course, sending emails to yourself and your colleagues and the mayor that you think would be helpful for people to know if they wish to support this effort?
Well, letting your council members know that you support it would be important, and also contacting the mayor's office or her deputy mayors to let them know why you think this is important would be great. I think the more we hear from community members, service providers, people who are actually on the ground doing this work and get specific, information about why this is so important, the stronger the case will be as we move into committee next week and hopefully full council the week after.
Right. Thank you so much. And I really
Thanks,
appreciate your work. Thank you so much. I appreciate the invitation to join the committee meeting next Wednesday. And of course, there's an opportunity for online public comment, and we'll share that with our members.
Terrific. Thanks, everybody. See you later.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I think what I will say is it is profoundly disturbing to know, as we do, that we have member organizations that are literally ordering supplies, including tents, hand sanitizer, harm reduction materials, and providing services to people, knowing that days or weeks later, other publicly paid individuals will be coming to take those items and discard them. And the harm that is done to people by this sort of thoughtless public policy really can't be overstated. But I also want to recognize that we actually have alternatives that work quite well. And in fact, as some of you have heard on these and other convening calls, what we're seeing is that offering people individual rooms that meet their needs, that help keep people safe, those are the most effective interventions that we have. And as usual, our advocacy in part has to be to talk about what works and how to scale it up. I want to recognize that the folks at Asian Counseling and Referral Service, who are longtime partners of the coalition in police accountability work, are also working with us to try to draft a community letter that better reflects the desire of folks on the ground for real solutions than what the city has so far come up with, and ask you all to mark your calendars. Unfortunately, we're going to ask you to mark your calendars for multiple meetings, so you won't all be able to come to all of the meetings. But what we're going to do now is talk a little bit about local, county, city, county, and state advocacy that is necessary. On Tuesday, there is a meeting of the King County Council at 1 o'clock in the afternoon that it has great significance for our work. On Wednesday at 2 o'clock is the meeting that Councilmember Morales mentioned, which is the Councilmember Andrew Lewis's Select Committee on Homelessness meeting. And on Thursday is a meeting of the Sound Transit Board of Directors. We also have some messages that we want to invite you to help us deliver to the Sound Transit Board of Directors. But I think I need to make sure that I'm not getting us off our schedule here. I think the next thing is that Hillary is going to talk briefly about what's coming up at the state level. And we're grateful to Michelle Thomas from the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, who's their Director of Policy and Advocacy, who's going to talk a bit about that. And then we'll come back to King County, City of Seattle, and Sound Transit.
Great, thanks, Allison. And it wouldn't be a coalition meeting if we weren't asking you to take lots of action or get prepared for lots of action. So thank you for being a part of this coalition. I am going to be really brief. With everything going on in the state, it is very likely that there will be a special session. I'm going to have Michelle talk about that in 1 minute, about what that might look like, and the timing of it, of what we do or don't know. But to prepare for that, we just want to make sure that everyone is ready, and that you know your legislative districts. In our follow-up to this, we're going to send you an email asking you to send us your legislative districts so that we can make sure that we have that, because when it is announced when the session will be, there's going to be some quick mobilizing. We, of course, are going to want to make sure that there are absolutely no cuts to any of the vital services that people experiencing homelessness in our state need. In a time of crisis and pandemic, that is something that is would not be good. And we know that the state is going to be looking at having to figure out how to deal with a budget that is going to have less money than it hoped to. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle for just a couple of minutes. Michelle is at the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, and she is really one of the best experts that our state has in housing and homelessness policy. Is on the ground in Olympia whenever we're in session. So thank you for being here to talk for just a couple minutes.
Hi, well, thanks for having me. So just really quickly, the question I'm getting multiple times a day is, when will a special session be? And at this point, no decisions have been made. There is no agreement between the governor's office, the Senate, and the House on when it would happen, or even if it will. Honestly, there is some disagreement from some key lawmakers that say that they don't think any decisions should be made to schedule a special session until we know more, one, about what's coming in the fall, and two, what's coming from the federal government. There's also opposing opinions on that say the longer we wait, the deeper we have to cut. There's also a lot of other things commingled into all these different opinions, including the upcoming November election, and whether or not lawmakers want to, right before they're asking voters to vote for them, make deep cuts, right? So just bottom line, there's no decision at this point. There could be one as early as June, and I don't think we're going to know when it's going to happen. I think we all will probably get like a couple of weeks notice at the most. It's technically the governor who has to call them back together, and it's the governor who then will decide the parameters of what the special session can consider. So one of the other big things on the table, and again, points of disagreement, is whether or not, if they do come back, they would also consider policy in addition to budget cuts. Of course, we would all wish, I would assume we all are on the same page, that if they do come back, that they wouldn't consider cuts, but they would consider progressive revenue. However, taking on really controversial and hard to pass policy is almost surely not going to happen during a special session, because if they do come back, they're going to come back for a very short time. And they also obviously have a lot of logistical problems with the idea of even convening together as human beings during the time of COVID. And so there's still even logistical questions about how could they be present to vote, and how would they be able to social distance. Because of that, and because of the fact that it's an election year, and they will have to freeze their election activities while they were in a special session, it is extraordinarily unlikely that they will do anything like committee meetings or controversial policy that will have to go through multiple channels. What's most likely is that once there's agreement on when a special session will happen, there will be conversations between all the caucuses, and there will be attempts to seek what we call a four corners agreement, meaning all the caucuses, so House and Senate Republicans, House and Senate Democrats, and then the governor, that there'd be agreement on what they're going to do, and they'd come back, quickly do it, and then maybe just for a day and then leave. But there is a lot of desire for policy, including from housing and homelessness advocates. And there is a lot of conversation about, are there things that can be passed that don't cost money that will make a difference in people's lives now? And the answer is probably yes. The Housing Alliance is still having a conversation with advocates from across the state on what that would look like and what those requests are. If the Coalition on Ending Homelessness and other advocates have requests around that, please be in communication with us. Again, I don't know if even if we nail down a list of policies we would want them to consider during a special session, I don't know if they will do it. There are some key housing champions, Representative Macri, Senator Kuderer, who are pushing for policy to be considered and are working on some proposals right now, just in case there is a special session and just in case policy can be considered. So just quickly on the budget as well, and Hillary, feel free to just time check me too. But did you want me to talk about the budget a little bit? Yeah, okay.
Just a couple minutes. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So just quickly, again, there's not total agreement on where we're at right now in terms of the budget deficit. Right now, 7 billion is what is on the table. But again, that's over a 2-year budget cycle. That's over a 4-year period. So at this point in time, if they took no action to do any budget cuts before they reconvene in January, they would come back in January and look at creating the next biennial budget, which would go into effect in July. Budgets in Washington State are 2 years. They go from July to July. So every legislative session that starts with an odd number, their primary job is to create the 2-year state budget. So that's what they'll be doing no matter what come January 2021. But because our budget is so in the hole, because revenues have not come in as projected and as planned, they will have to consider how to balance it. And they're required to have a balanced budget, not just over the 2-year budget outlook that they're creating, but over 4 years. So the $7 billion number that's being thrown around right now is a budget deficit that would need to be balanced or accounted for over a 4-year period. So when they're writing the next budget, if it stays at 7 billion when they convene, they will have to subtract out 3.5 billion from current spending. So half of that 7. I mean, they could do it differently too. I mean, they don't have to just 50-50, but that's just a logical way to proceed. But that's just for example, so you know how big that is. But and many of you know this, but just to say, the big problem for human services and housing and homelessness is that the vast majority of the budget that is discretionary, meaning it's not an entitlement, it's not required by the Constitution. K-12 schools are required by the Constitution, so they're largely protected and they're the biggest chunk of the operating budget. So the slice, if you think of it as a pie, the slice that's left that they can cut from is all discretionary, and that's all human services and housing and homelessness. So 3.5 billion out of the discretionary small slice of the whole operating budget is a massive blow to everything that we all care about, including housing and essential needs, age, blind, and disabled, TANF, all the critical programs, everything. So that's why, I mean, so years ago when we were in the years of budget deficits, all of us together with our nonprofits did a lot of work to get board resolutions from your nonprofits in support of progressive revenue. That required a lot of conversations amongst your boards to get there. I think a lot of us are already there this time, but that work needs to renew. We need everybody to renew the work to get your boards and organizations fully 100% behind a massive call to arms for progressive revenue in the state, because an austerity budget that cuts from human services is absolutely unacceptable. But it's going to take a big movement of all of us. Largely, King County lawmakers are better than the rest of the state on this, but they're not all there. So Skitch is going to be critical in pushing. And even when we have progressive lawmakers who are already there, they need constituents standing behind them, pushing them, so they can point and say, listen, this austerity approach is not acceptable. All of my constituents are telling me we have to find another way. And that allows them to raise their voice within the caucus and be stronger, because they can say, listen, I got 500 emails today that said no to cuts, so I cannot accept these cuts. And so that really helps center them in the caucus conversations to oppose the approach that we all saw during the Gregoire administration, where we cut, and we still haven't made up for those yet from the Great Recession. So I can say more on this, obviously.
We know you can, Michelle, and we so appreciate your passion and your smarts. I think what I will just say right now is thank you for giving us, everyone on this call, the stark understanding that we will be joining together on very short notice with you and with other partners across the state to organize and mobilize ourselves to be voices, probably before a special session is even called. And so among the things that will be happening online is our Homelessness Advocacy 101 workshop. I see Nancy Amade is there on her Zoom call. So get ready, Nancy, because I think what we'll be doing is we'll be reminding everybody who their lawmakers are. Jeffrey asked a great question about should we be contacting lawmakers in our own legislative districts, or should staff be contacting lawmakers in the legislative districts where their services exist? And the short answer is both. Your lawmakers represent you in your legislative district, and they need to hear from you. They work for you, and everyone needs to be working not only with your boards, but honestly with the people you serve. There are shelters that are now serving people 24/7, and it's a great opportunity to involve guests, residents, clients in learning a little bit about the legislative process and thinking about creative ways that people can communicate about the value and the essential nature of services like housing and essential needs, rent subsidies, and so on, to bring those voices directly to Olympia, even if we're not doing it in person. So we're on notice. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing that sober and stark reality with us. But we are nothing if not persistent. And those of us who weathered the Great Recession know, as you said, the harm that was done, and that we haven't even come back from that yet. And we're not going there this time. So thank you very much, Michelle, for all of the extraordinary work that you are doing in conversation with our lawmakers. And we'll be working with you closely to figure out how do we engage the coalition's members going forward. Thanks. I know you have other things to do, but you might also want to hear about what's happening on the local level. So I'm just going to run through a few quick things. We have, I think, a situation in which the information is coming so quickly that not everyone knows about things that are major that are happening, even in our own community. So a few days ago, Sound Transit issued a press advisory stating that they would begin resuming fare collection on light rail, and along with that, resuming fare enforcement as of Monday, May 18th. Essentially, what they said publicly was that they're blaming people experiencing homelessness for their need to do this, along with, of course, their fiscal crisis, which is real. And they referenced the non-destinational riders, what they referred to as biohazard conditions and vandalism on Sound Transit property as the reasons that they were taking these actions. And in conversation with Sound Transit staff, what we learned is that their fare enforcement is going to consist of, I mean, it's hard to know how they will do this in an appropriately socially distanced manner, but if people cannot show that they have proof of a fare paid, they will be asked to get off at the next stop. And if they don't get off at the next stop, the Sound Transit fare enforcement personnel will call the King County Sheriff's deputies. So essentially what that message is if you are lucky enough to have the cash right now to be able to pay your fare, you can ride. And if you're not, or you don't have access to a phone or internet to refill your card, then you're not welcome. And not only do we reject that as a totally tone deaf and unhelpful response in the midst of the greatest crisis that many of us have experienced in our lifetimes. But we also have a backstory. And so that's what I want to share with all of you. Between now and next Thursday, we are going to have an action for you to take to help apply serious pressure to the members of the Sound Transit Board, who include King County Executive Dow Constantine, King County Council members Claudia Balducci and Joe McDermott, Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin, and Seattle City Council member Deborah Juarez, as well as elected officials from other parts of King County. Because over 2 months ago, I requested that Sound Transit reopen Union Station bathrooms for people to use in this community. I spent a great deal of time, including an hour on the phone with the Deputy CEO of Sound Transit. We explained how it would be possible to reopen those vital public bathrooms, staff them. We offered volunteer and expert paid staff to help assist in reopening those public restrooms in a public building bought and paid for by taxpayer dollars, and we were refused. So to claim that Sound Transit's current circumstances are related to the fact that people don't have access to toilets, and to have refused to share the resources that Sound Transit owns is just wholly unacceptable. And I will say that this is in great contrast to the way in which King County Metro has gone about trying to partner with us and our members and partner organizations to address the needs of many hundreds of people without shelter who are riding buses, including the Night Owl buses, which is not news, I think, to anybody in this coalition, but it has become increasingly of concern as the census that is allowed on Metro buses has dropped dramatically to try to ensure a safer operating environment for drivers as well as a safer riding environment for riders. So we appreciate that Metro has taken a true partnership approach with us in trying to address the needs of people in our community who have nowhere to go. And we reject Sound Transit's response to this crisis. So we will be asking for you to take action with us over the course of the next week and probably beyond. We've discussed the sweeps. I think that Sasha or Hillary is going to put a link to an action alert that our friends at the Transit Riders Union have put together in support of the Morales legislation. I am going to be testifying at the Select Committee next Wednesday. We've been working with our partners to craft a number of more public-facing letters and sign-on opportunities for people, so we will keep you posted about those. And as I said, we will be hosting an Advocacy 101 workshop to help get everybody ready before the special session that we expect is probably coming. So from those really disheartening and grim pieces of news, I want to also share with you something very positive and hopeful. I mean, every time we have these meetings, it takes quite a bit for us to prepare for them, in part because there's so much information and we're trying to bring you useful information, in part because we are lucky to have so many partners and allies whose voices we want to also give a platform to, but in part because we're a relatively small staff and we are working at full tilt. So it is really wonderful to be able to share with you that we are going to be hiring 2 positions at the coalition. And I see Kira clapping. Thank you, Kira, for that enthusiastic response. We'll be sharing those position announcements next week online. We ask all of you to look at them, to spread them far and wide, to help us find the right people to join us. We haven't completely nailed down what the position titles are, but they are both going to be full-time positions, and one is going to be a director of operations and programs, and the other position is going to be an advocacy and policy position that interacts closely with our membership organizer and with the policy work that I lead. So we're very excited to be able to be hiring even in the midst of crisis, and that is really a testament to the work that you all do and staff and board have continued to do, because to quote from a poem by Anitra Freeman, who read some of her poetry on our membership meeting last month. I hope I'll get this quote right, but I came to the right planet to find work. So we are going to continue to do our usual of pointing out public policies that are wrong, misguided, wasteful, and harmful, of pointing out alternative public policies and uses of public resources that are better, of lifting up the good work that you all are doing, and of emboldening the voices of people with firsthand knowledge, both of the realities that people are living through right now and of what works and why we need to invest more deeply in the solutions that we are aware of. So I think that is the last part of my portion of the agenda. I'm just going to quickly check, and among the things that are happening are lots of policy changes, some of them really positive that we need you to know about, and a funding opportunity. And I believe that Jason is going to share quickly some of those COVID resources and the new emergency shelter funding that is available starting very shortly. I'm going to turn things over to Jason.
Thank you, Allison. So we're just going to briefly review some COVID-related resources that we put together at the coalition. This is based on lots of really tremendous feedback. My workers, program managers, about what field are. Hey.
Your audio was cutting out a bit, but I think it might be better now. So why don't you keep going?
Hi there, can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Forgive me, home internet issues. So we've compiled a list of COVID-1 landing page to make it easy for you to look at all of the resources that we've put together. We're going to put a link to that in the chat box and briefly share the screen here just to kind of show you a little bit of a landscape of what we have available to cover. So this is our landing page, homelessinfo.org/resource/COVID. This will be in the follow-up email. You can see at the top of the page there is our homeless service change tracker. A lot of you on this call have helped us develop this information, so thank you for that. What this is an attempt to capture a current snapshot of what frontline survival services look like in King County. We heard from many of you that as shelters, meal programs, and hygiene centers shifted and adjusted their operations to meet public health guidelines, that it was challenging to know where to refer clients for available services. And so that's what we've attempted to capture here is frontline services, again, day centers, shelter programs, outreach services, things like that. Our intention with this is for this to be a supplemental document. We're not trying to duplicate what 211 and other information and referral services are doing. We just want to help create an accurate snapshot of what's available. We hope that this is useful. If you read through this and you find that anything needs adjusting, we know things are quickly changing on the ground, please send us information at notices@homelessinfo.org so that we can make sure that this document is as current and up to date as possible. And then scrolling down a little bit, you'll see a couple of other links to some resource guides we've pulled together. One is related to discounted telephone service. We've heard from a lot of outreach workers that as programs have shifted to offering remote case management services, clients are struggling with having phones and minutes on their phones to be able to access that. We've put together a little bit of information about changes that have been made through the Lifeline program. Lifeline is a federal program that offers discounted phones and phone service plans to low-income individuals, people who were on SSI, receiving SNAP benefits or other federal programs qualify. The Federal Communications Commission released a waiver that suspends the recertification and re-verification requirements for Lifeline phone users. So anyone who is currently able to continue or reactivate their coverage without having to jump through all of the hoops of resubmitting their information again. And once approved through Lifeline, so we have listed there. In addition to that, DSHS has made some changes to make it easier for Lifeline clients to add minutes to their phone. Clients no longer need to request that a PIN code be mailed to them. They can simply have minutes added to their phone by calling and requesting that from the toll-free number there. Now, the one piece of information that I'm still trying to get for this is where these providers are distributing phones. Previously, groups like SafeLink would post information about having hours in front of DSHS offices and other community service programs to give out phones. Some of these providers have suspended those operations. Some of them still have limited hours. If anyone on this call has information about when and where these phones are being distributed, I'd love to add that information to this document. So please email me at jason@homelessinfo.org. And then also in this same area of our website, we posted some public benefits updates as well. We've been working with Solid Ground and DSHS to track changes that are being made to cash and food assistance programs through the state. We've touched on this at previous meetings, so I won't go into too much detail. The one piece that I've heard that's new is that DSHS is pursuing overpayments on folks who got the supplemental addition to their EBT card if households were somehow misleading about their household composition. So for example, if a household claimed more children in their household than was actually the case, or something like that. Sometimes these are honest mistakes. You know, for example, sometimes it's hard to know if you have partial custody of a child, which household they should be put in for something like that. DSHS encourages folks to check out their manual, which is available on their website if any of these issues come up. And then last but not least, we've put together some information related to economic impact payments or federal stimulus checks, as they're more commonly known. I see that Nicole Palchevsky with DESC is on the phone with us. Thank you, Nicole, for helping us put this information together. What we've added since then is a step-by-step guide to helping folks walk through the non-filer form. So everyone who has submitted a 2019 or 2018 tax return got their stimulus benefits automatically, as well as those who are recipients of SSI, SSDI. For those who didn't file a tax return in recent years, the IRS has created a tool to help folks claim their benefits without having to file. Now, in the document that we uploaded, it has a step-by-step guide, including screenshots of what the application process looks like, as well as tips for how to connect your clients with low-cost checking account services, and suggestions for community mail locations. Stimulus checks are either sent direct deposit or by mail. Direct deposit is better because it connects people significantly more quickly with their benefits. So again, all of these resources are available for you to review on our website. We want to stress that this is an iterative process and that we hope to further refine and improve upon these documents as we get new information. So please take a look, and if there's anything that you would suggest be added or adjusted, please let us know. We'd be happy to. And then in addition to that, Allison mentioned a new funding opportunity, and this is a sort of a time-sensitive thing that we wanted to make sure that you were all aware of. Just shy of about $2 million has been made available through the CARES Federal Stimulus Act for food and shelter programs. This funding is meant to go to existing emergency food and shelter programs in King County, with a number of sort of restrictions and encouragements as highlighted below. This is meant to supplement rent and utility assistance programs with a focus on communities of color and refugee communities, shelter programs and motel vouchers with an emphasis for seniors and those who are fleeing from domestic violence, as well as food bank and meal programs, specifically those offering culturally relevant services in the community. This is a pool of funding that has previously been available for folks who are at agencies who have not applied for this before. They're strongly encouraging that you attend an information session via Zoom that's happening immediately after this meeting is over at 11. It looks like a link was just put in the chat box. Thank you, Sasha. So if you are interested in applying for this, we do encourage you to check out the webinar happening after this meeting. The application process formally opens next Wednesday, the 27th. There will be another webinar the following Thursday to explain sort of how the application process works for this funding. And then the deadline is June 10th. So again, this is a sort of late breaking information that we wanted to make sure that you were all aware of. If you're interested, please sign up for the 2 webinars that we put in the chat box and follow their instructions for more information. Okay, thank you so much for letting me share that. And then I think, if I remember this correctly, I'm handing things back over to Hillary, who's going to be giving us an update on the 2020 census.
Great, thanks, Jason. I'm going to give a really brief update because we have one other thing that is not on the agenda that we're squeezing back in. But as we all know, here are some of the lovely social media graphics we're going to tell you that are available. The census is still happening, and the biggest takeaways I have for you today are that the deadline is extended until October 31st, 2020, and also that we really are recommending that everyone help people that you work with fill out the census as soon as possible. This can be a great thing to do if you need something to do while folks are sheltering in place in your shelters for 24/7, or if you're doing outreach and have the ability. Right now, it's really important. Some people might wonder, you know, there was going to be, we've talked about before, the fact that there was going to be some service-based enumeration and ways of counting people experiencing homelessness. Those operations are currently on pause and unknown when they're going to happen because the Census Bureau is following public health guidelines in all the different locations that they're doing the census in our country. And while this is not the official census message, we know some people might be worried about duplication. Our coalition's message is really that it is far more likely for there to be an undercount of people experiencing homelessness and housing instability than a duplicate count, and that the Census Bureau has some really in-depth ways that they do deduplication. So please don't worry about people helping folks get counted now, and in case You might think, well, what if they get counted later? We think that it's going to be the best thing to do to help folks get counted right now. There are 3 ways to fill out the census. This information is all on our blog post with the agenda that we'll send out after this meeting. The easiest ways right now are going to be helping someone fill it out online at 2020census.gov, or helping someone call in to complete the census. We encourage you to familiarize yourself if you're going to be providing this service to help someone with what the online form looks like. If you have not completed the census yourself, I encourage you to do that as well. It's going to ask people for a census ID that would have gotten mailed to residential households. If you don't have that, there's a button to say you don't have it, and then you can go through, and there's a box that says I don't have a street address, and it's going to ask someone if they were experiencing homelessness on April 1st, which is still kind of the point in time snapshot date that they're looking to. So really just helping people complete that to the best of their ability. The phone number, there are multiple languages available, and there's different phone numbers to call for the languages, so we encourage you to help folks get the language they need. Just one note on, there are paper forms somewhat available. If someone was in a household and they didn't complete the census by mid-April, they would have gotten a paper form in the mail. And so if they have that, they can use it. Some of you might, like, especially if you're working in a permanent supportive housing program or a program where you were already connected to the Census Bureau about doing a count of folks in your program, you may have gotten some paper forms from the Census Bureau, or a form to submit a more full picture of folks. If you already have that, communicate with the Census Bureau about what you're doing. Other than that, we've advocated for having paper forms, for example, for outreach workers to be able to go out and have in the community, and that advocacy has been strong, but has not resulted in paper forms being available at this time. And yeah, so I think those are the biggest message. Do help people fill out the census, and there is some time. And as a reminder, census information is confidential. It will not be released with any other agencies, including ICE, public assistance programs, or other law enforcement. So while this might be a time where people are nervous about reporting some information, making sure that people know that their census information is protected in private. And so in the follow-up, we'll send a couple of links that have, for example, these beautiful images of some of our community leaders completing the census and other materials, and I encourage you to help folks complete the census. And I think we're going to turn it, I've lost my agenda. Turning it back to Allison, I believe.
Yeah. Thank you. You should see the process that we go through to create the agenda for these meetings, you guys. So I appreciate there are lots of questions and comments in the chat box that we just don't have time to look at right now, but we'll do our best to get back to you afterwards. I wanted to follow up on one thing that I meant to describe to you as an advocacy opportunity that is coming right up. So just briefly, as I think everyone here knows, among the reasons that it's complex for the census to be able to do what it had planned, namely to enumerate people in their shelters or in unsheltered locations, is the fact that many programs have moved. And one of the programs that moved very successfully is the DESC main shelter, which took people out of truly a congregate setting where it was not going to be possible to keep people safe and comply with social distancing requirements and recommendations, and to move some 200 folks into individual rooms at the Red Lion Hotel in Renton. And that has worked remarkably well from the perspective of both the guests and the staff, both DESC staff and hotel staff, and we've seen some really interesting and important responses come from that. Nevertheless, there is pushback that really has taken the form of threatening the potential to renew the lease at that hotel. There are certain King County Council members and Renton elected officials who are threatening to withhold some of the COVID package of funding that the King County Council has been asked to approve that would go towards renewing the lease for people at that location. That's frankly unacceptable. Those folks cannot go back to the DESC main shelter. There is no way to maintain their safety or the safety of the staff who are working with them. And I think that what we're seeing here is, again, an example of conflating concerns about a highly communicable disease with concerns about poor and homeless people, and really a lack of understanding the ways in which the way that we take care of each other is the way that we get through this. So we're going to be asking you to help communicate to King County Council members that their vote needs to include an assurance that those people will not be turned out onto the street or required to go back into a congregate setting that is inappropriate. And I think that it will be important for elected officials, both at the City of Renton and at the King County Council, to hear from many people. So particularly if you live in Renton, and if you're a South King County resident, we're going to ask you to communicate. And I hope that we'll get your participation in the action alerts that are going to be coming your way fast and furiously at the end of this week and the beginning of next week. I see that we're joined by our musical guests, Dear Crow, thank you so much. We're almost ready for you all. And also by Valerie Wonder from the Seattle Public Library. Valerie, thank you so much for being here. I don't know if you were on earlier, but we did reference the public restrooms, and I want to acknowledge that Valerie put together a flyer because there wasn't a flyer before. And thank you so much for doing that. We're going to send that out to our membership. And I think maybe at next month's meeting, Valerie, we'll give you a little bit of time on the agenda to really do justice to talking about the Seattle Public Library. Thank you as a partner. So we're going to do a quick piece about masks, which includes what I hope will be a very fun token of our appreciation to all of you, our members, in support of the practice of wearing masks and encouraging others to do so in a respectful way. So Hillary, and then we're going to have some music to close our meeting out.
Right, so as folks very likely know, this past Monday was the beginning of the public health directive from our public health officer to wear face coverings when in public. And I just want to also mention this beautiful art is up here. Jason's going to talk about that in a second, but we are talking about cloth face coverings, especially as we still are wanting to reserve the N95 and the surgical face masks for cases where they are needed, which is in some of your locations as well. But we are, so we have information on our website about those directives in case you need it. The public health calls that the Healthcare for the Homeless Network organizes on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. have been talking about this as well. So if you have questions related to your work, there are resources. But I wanted to share, we have talked a little bit about this at our senior leadership meetings about the fact that the coalition was getting a big order of cloth masks available, and those are going to be distributed through in partnership with King County, as well as some cloth face coverings that the City of Seattle provided. We are glad to be getting those out specifically to people. Our goal is to get them to people who are experiencing homelessness in day centers, outreach programs, safe parking, people who are living unsheltered outside. The process for getting those is going to be Charles, yesterday from the Department of Community and Human Services at King County, sent an email to their points of contact at organizations who provide services to people experiencing homelessness. And so if you are an organization who thinks you need some of these, checking in with your whoever might be your DCHS point of contact is the best thing to do. You can also email COVID homelessness response at kingcounty.gov. We're trying to have a streamlined process of one person from an organization putting in a request, and there's more information that really the county is going to drive that distribution, but we are glad that this is a resource, and if you have any questions about that, before emailing them at all, if you felt like it, you can email notices@homelessinfo.org, and we can also connect you. And for folks who are not providing direct services but are in need of masks or cloth face coverings, there are many resources available to get those as well, and I think that the county has some of those listed on their website. And then Jason's going to talk really briefly about this art, and then we'll have our music.
Thanks, Hillary. For those of you who follow the coalition on social media, you may have noticed that we have been peppering our posts with these lovely animal illustrations. These have been provided to us courtesy of Ricardo Levins Morales, who is a Minneapolis St. Paul-based artist who has been gracious enough to lend his work to us. We have posters of the charming chickadee picture that you see in front of you here that we're making available as a thank you gift to our members. If you are interested in getting one of these posters, we will have instructions in the follow-up email that we will be sending to all meeting registrants about that. So just want to say thank you to Ricardo, and if you would like to add this charming picture to your wall, please look for that follow-up email.
And I would say not only to your wall, but also in public spaces, in the programs that you are operating. We're getting a large order of these posters, as Jason said, from Ricardo. I am going to turn things over now to Dear Crow. Some of you who have visited Olympia, who might have stopped by a particular lawmaker's office, might recognize Penka Jane Kalevsky, who has been a wonderful presence in Olympia. Maybe we're going to tap you, Penka Jane, when we do our Advocacy 101 workshop prior to a special session. Yeah. We love the fact that there are many, many people in the coalition circle who have many talents that folks don't necessarily know about. And it was a great joy to learn of Penka Jane's beautiful voice and fiddle playing. And she is joined by her partner, musical partner and otherwise partner, Brian Lindsay. Thank you so very much for joining us. We are going to turn things over to Dear Crow with thanks, and I think that's going to be the close of our meeting, so we'll stick around, people can chat, but I hope you all enjoy Dear Crow.
All right. Hello all, we are so pleased to be here for today's meeting and so happy to be able to play for you guys.
Yeah,
we're gonna take it away.
Big thanks to all of you for all of the work you're doing.
Oh my God, yes.
We're happy to be here to be part of this. So
yeah,
we're gonna sing a little bit and play some tunes. Yeah, this is a song called Bowling Green, and we're gonna follow it up with an old-time fiddle tune that called Billy in the Low Ground.
It's my favorite tune, and I wanted to play it today because it's one that I learned when I was in kind of a rough period, and it's relentlessly cheerful, I found, and so that seemed an appropriate vibe for today.
Just before we get started, can everybody hear us okay? Is that
thumbs up if
yes? Cool.
Awesome.
Here we go. Wish I was in Bowling Green, sitting in a chair. One arm around my pretty little girl, the other around my dear, the other around my dear Bowling Green. Hey, good old Bowling Green. If you see that man of mine, tell him once for me. If he loves another girl, yes, I'll set him free. Yes, I'll set him touch 'em if you dare, touch 'em if you dare, Bowling Green. Hey, good old Bowling Green. Awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much. We're gonna do, I think, one more song, and this one is special.
Yeah, so this is a sing-along. I know we're all muted, so unfortunately we can't hear you, but you can hear us. And we just have to kind of imagine the collective nature of this. This is one that it's usually sung, in large groups, in people's kitchens, in pubs, in restaurants, sometimes on beaches or on fires. So we can't do it in person, but we can still do it. The chorus is pretty simple, and as soon as you pick it up, and if you are comfortable, I would love for you all to join.
And just know nobody can hear you anyway, so
Yeah.
just sing your heart out. This is the moment.
Clouds are upon the summer sky. There's thunder in the wind. Row on and homeward high, nor take one look behind. Row on another day may shine with brighter light. Ply the oars and pull away. There's dawn beyond the night. There where thou goest, words of love, say all that words can say. Changeless affection, strength to prove, and speed along the way. Row on
Row on another day may shine with brighter light. Ply, ply the oars and pull away. There's dawn beyond the night. Row on, God speed the way. Thou canst not linger here. Clouds are upon the closing day. Tomorrow may be clear. Row on another day may shine with brighter light. Ply, ply the oars and pull away. There's dawn beyond the night. And yet a star shines constant still through yonder cloudy sky. And hope as bright my bosom fills from fear that cannot die. Row on another day may shine with brighter light. Ply, ply the oars and pull away. There's dawn beyond the night. Row on another day may shine with brighter light. Ply, ply the oars and pull away. There's dawn beyond the night. Stay strong, everybody.
Hang in there. I wish you all health and a good period of rest.
Thank you so much. We're so grateful for everyone sharing their skills and talents. And as someone mentioned in our chat box, and I'll share this with you, Pinka Jane, this is musical medicine. So thank you all so much for joining us, for the work that you're doing. We hope that you bring this beauty and harmony into the rest of your day, which may not be filled with beauty and harmony, but which we know you will make better, whatever it is that you are doing. And that's why we are so grateful to be in coalition with all of you. Thank you so much, dear Crow. I understand you're recording an album, so we look forward to hearing about that and spreading the word. And we will see everybody online. And certainly June 18th is our next scheduled membership meeting. And J.R. Rhodes, who is a beautiful singer, songwriter, and guitar player who has played at benefit concerts for us at the Royal Room, has graciously agreed to be our special musical guest. So we're going to keep this up to nourish ourselves and keep each other's spirits strong for the work. Thank you again so much to everyone who's contributed to our meeting today.